welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kayla, and if you're not new, thanks for coming back. Always happy to have you. If you're new here, I like to do a lot of book reading, writing, lifestyle content here on this channel, so if any of those things interest you, make sure you think about hitting that subscribe button, sticking around, hanging out with the crew. We got a lot of fun videos that come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Grab your coffee. We have some good books to talk about today. Today's video is my March 2023 reading wrap-up. I read a lot in March. I was not expecting to read a lot in March, and I frickin' read a lot in March. I really did not expect being able to read a ton in the month of March, but I had a lot more time than I anticipated. If you saw one of my more recent posts over on Instagram, I talked about how my new job has a commute that allows me 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day of extra reading time just in my commute alone. Thanks so much. So I read a lot. In my TBR, think I picked out 5 books that I want to read, and I read 6 books in the month of March, which is far more than I was expecting. I am also really proud that there's only 1 book on my March TBR that did not get read. I feel like that never happens. I never stick to my TBR. Honestly, I'm gonna credit this little cube that if you watch my April TBR and my March, I have been putting my TBR books in one designated place, so I always know where to find them. And that's been really helpful. I pulled literally just like book after book out of that little cube. I also will say I read books 10 to 15 of my yearly goal. My goal is to read 45 books in the month, no, 45 books in the year 2023. I've read books 10 to 15, and I'm still like 4 ahead of schedule. Right now I'm 5 ahead of schedule, but I was 4 ahead of schedule throughout the whole month of March. We're just gonna go in order of the way I read them. So the first book that I finished and read in March was This Poison Heart by Kayla Victoria. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot on my channel. It was in a haul. It was in my March TBR. I did a review of this book. So I'm not going to say too much, but this is a secret garden and Greek mythology retelling featuring a black main character who has some magical powers that can grow plants and make them bloom really quickly. And she inherits a manor with a dark curse kind of associated with it. This is a duology, I believe, potentially a trilogy, but so far I've only found 2 books, both of which are published. Overall, I gave this 4 stars. I felt like it got a little distracted towards the end of the book. We were trying to do a lot in one book, and we left a lot of threads kind of never finished off at the end of this book, which I guess makes sense because there is a sequel coming, but they felt like there were some things that could be addressed and wrapped up, and we just kept adding more things to need a second book, if that makes sense. The last maybe 50-100 pages of this book weren't my favorite, but I did really like the concept. I like the characters, I like the settings, I like the retelling, the writing style, all of that. I'm a big fan of Kayla Victoria. That was my first read of March. 4 stars, my first 384 pages of the month. Next, I read my first twisted tale in over a year. I read Go the Distance by Jen Kalanita. This is a Hercules twisted tale retelling that features Meg. Meg is the main character in this book, which I love. I also did a review for this on my channel, a full in-depth review, so that will also be in the cards. Not going to spend too much time on it, but basically the twist in this book takes place after the events of the Hercules movie that we know and love, and Meg would like to become a god to live in Olympus with Hercules forever so they can be in love and do all the things, and Hera sends her on a quest to earn her godhood and prove herself a true hero just like Hercules did. Along the way, she has to confront her past and break down her walls and learn to truly love somebody. I gave this book 4 stars. Also, I think some of the quest things that Meg had to do were just a little bit lame. Like, she had like one like true like Greek mythology beast situation, and then she had a couple that were just like, this is what we're gonna make Meg do. Interesting. We got to go to the underworld. We saw our favorite characters like Phil and Hades. Pegasus was a big feature of that book. So I overall really enjoyed it as a twisted tale. It made me remember why I love that series so much. Also want to point out that I read Go the Distance in literally 24 hours. Same with the next book that we're gonna talk about, which is The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the 3rd and final book in the Inheritance Games series. Typically with series, when I get to the last book, I am like, I'm never gonna read that book because I'm not ready for the series to end. But I, in March, really felt like, okay, it is time. I need to know what happened. This one, I will say, is probably the darkest of the books in the trilogy. It's it gets pretty dark. There's a hostage situation. It involves Avery Grams, who learns that she is inheriting a billionaire's fortune over his family. She just has to survive living in his estate for 1 year. In this book, she comes up on the 1-year anniversary of living at that estate. She is about to become the richest 18-year-old in the world. She is about to inherit literally billions and billions of dollars, but she is still trying to puzzle out why she was selected, and she's also trying to get back the person being taken hostage. I'm trying not to say too much because I don't want to spoil it. Also, she kind of explores her love with one of the billionaire's grandsons. I shall not say which one, but I really loved this book. This was my only 5-star read for the month of March. I loved this book. I flew through it, as I always do. I read this in less than 24 hours, and I think Jennifer Lynn Barnes just does such cool things with this book. I will also say that for the first time, I don't normally, in like mysteries, thrillers, puzzle books, I'm along for the ride. I'm just waiting for somebody else who's smarter than me to figure things out. But this time, I solved some of the clues before the characters, and I am proud of myself for that. So I give this 5 stars. I loved this. I also think that this ending was perfect for this trilogy. I think when Avery inherits all these billions of dollars, what she does with it is absolutely awesome. It is perfect. It is so true to her. I felt like we watched Avery grow quite a bit in this series, but at the end of the day, she is still very true to herself and to her roots, and I so appreciated that. I'm sad that the trilogy is over, but I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. This one was the off TBR book. Like, this is one, or I should say a off TBR book, and that was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I don't know why, but I felt super drawn to read this. I put this on a poll with something else. I don't think I can remember what I put it up against, but this one, this like knocked it out of the park. I also read this book in 24 hours. This one was a bit shorter. This was 280 pages, but basically it follows this girl. I don't even remember her name because I read it so fast. Cadence, who has had like an accident or something happen where she has lost part of her memory. She had kind of a traumatic brain injury and she can't remember parts of her previous summers where she spends with her family on this island. I want to say like it's off the coast of Massachusetts. It is not Martha's Vineyard, but they like go to Martha's Vineyard. It has a Martha's Vineyard vibe. Beechwood Island, Massachusetts. She summers there with her extended family every single summer. So her aunts, who all have children who she grew up with, they each have a house on this island, and this island becomes basically like the Sinclair family fortress for the summer, and she has spent every summer of her life there, but she cannot remember the past summer that was there because she had some sort of incident or accident. So she goes back to Beechwood to try and piece together that lost memory that she can't get back. She goes and she unveils this whole thing that happened the previous summer or 2 summers ago, whatever it was, and she learned a lot of the truth about her family members and how they are just not maybe the best people, that they are like greedy, money hungry, like not the nicest people around, that may or may not compromise their values for money and physical wealth. And she learns that something really, really tragic happened with her closest cousin and her first love that she has completely blocked from her memory, and she relearns that and relearns the role that she played in that book, in that whole scenario. I gave this book 4 stars. The main reason it lost a star for me was I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was gripping. I wanted to know what happened. I flew through this book, but I really struggled to find a likable character. That's a big thing for me. If I can't connect with the main character, I can't find a side character that I'm like, I am rooting for you. I like you as a person. We connect, like I get you. I'm just not going to love the book as much. It's going to detract from that experience for me. That is what I found with this book. I liked everything else. I liked the setting. I liked the pace. I liked the concept. I liked all of that. I liked that it was a little bit of a thriller, but not a scary thriller. But these characters, I found them basically all deplorable. Like there was not a single one where I was like, I really like you. No, I also will say people get affected by these things. It's me, I'm people. There is a death of dogs in this book that like 2 really cute pups die a really, really traumatic way. So just be aware of that. If that's not your thing, if that's not your vibe, I get it. I'm with you. I was really sad when I got to that part. So just keep that in mind. That also contributed to the -1 star. Take anybody else, do anything else, leave the dogs alone. The next book we have, I got from the library through Libby, read it on my iPad. Fairy Tale by Stephen frickin' King. This was my first Stephen King book, and I basically read it because I knew it wasn't a horror. I know he's written some other fantasy, like I think like The Obsidian Tower or The Dark Tower, maybe it's called, I don't really know, are not horror novels, but they just didn't catch my eye. But Fairy Tale did. I love fantasy, I love fairy tales, so I thought this would be a great first Stephen King. It follows Christopher Reed, whose mother died when he was young. He has grown up a very difficult life, lost his mother at a young age. To cope with that, his dad turned to alcoholism. They almost lost their house, like very dark times growing up. His father eventually turned it around and they grew to have a very, very close bond. He's in high school, he is walking home, and there is this house in his town neighborhood that is kind of decrepit, looks a little creepy, kind of looks like it's in a scary psycho movie. It's like very run down. It's supposed to have this like very scary dog and this like crotchety, angry old man. One day he's walking by and the dog is freaking out behind the fence, and he goes to check out what's going on, make sure everything is okay, and finds that the old man has fallen off of a ladder and broken his leg. He becomes like unlikely friends with this guy. He really falls in love with his dog Radar, and ultimately becomes the caregiver for this old man. He also learns that this old man has like a stockpile of gold, literal gold, in his house, and discovers this well that leads to a secret other world under the city of Chicago. Basically, in this world, we meet twisted, dark versions of fairy tale characters that we know and love, like Rumpelstiltskin. There were some Darth Vader references and Anakin Skywalker references. Goldilocks, all sorts of things kind of come through in this world. Unfortunately, this world has been plagued by some sort of gray curse that basically has everybody dying of this curse that just turns them to blobs of flesh, is kind of what I gathered. The royal family was all unseated and murdered, driven out of the kingdom. There are a few remaining royals that are scattered throughout this land. So while Charlie is in this other world that is called Empis, he decides that he is going to try and save this kingdom, break this curse, and reinstate the royal family as it should be. He ends up getting taken hostage, and a lot happens throughout that novel. He also originally goes to Empis to find a sundial that is magic, that can make people or things young again, and he is trying to make Mr. Bowditch's dog Radar young again so she doesn't die. I really liked this book. I think it was the first adult fantasy I've read in a really long time, especially an adult epic fantasy. I've been finding those especially intimidating the past few years, so it was really interesting for me to kind of dive into the story. I'm not familiar with Stephen King's writing very much, as this was my first read, so I'm not sure if he's typically this like slow of a writer. I'm not sure if his writing is normally this slow and descriptive and wordy, and he took a lot of time on a lot of little things. He had a lot of like sidebars and diatribes and all sorts of things. That it made the process of reading really slow, and it took me a long time to read. Like reading this book truly slowed down my reading pace. There was no way I was reading this book in one day. It took me a lot longer to read than it normally does because I had taken a lot. I had to memorize or like remember details, really read what he's saying to make sure I wasn't missing any key pieces of information. I thought the concept was really cool. I loved the world of Empis that he built, and this kind of, I liked the history and the lore that he created of this world of Empis, where there's this dethroned family and this usurper. I really liked that. I liked how Charlie developed and changed and really felt like a fairy tale storybook character. Fantastical characters and creatures that he met along the way were just such like an enchanting kind of delight and such a dark tale. It was not horror by any means, but it was dark, and there were certainly dreary and depressing parts to this story. That goes without saying. I really liked the story overall as a whole. I liked the concept, I liked the conflict, I liked our characters, I liked the setting, I liked Empis, I liked this magic. I liked the fusion of magic with the real world. However, I do think that it was about 200 pages too long. I was reading and I literally was like, guys, I can't do this. I can't make it to the end of this book. I have 200 pages left, and I thought we just solved the main plot point of the story. Like, I thought we solved the main conflict, but we still have 200 pages left, so there's gotta be something else coming. It just felt like I could not get to the end, and especially the last 20% of the book, I was like, well, please. It took me so long to read. So much so that I did not think I could read this in the 2 weeks I had it for Libby, borrowed from Libby. And I bought the iBook and I finished it with like 4 hours to spare. So that was disappointing. I think I mentioned it was 600 pages long, so it was for sure the longest book I read in March, possibly this year, but I think some of the From Blood and Ash were a bit longer, but I can't quite remember. Longest book of the month, and I did rate it the lowest just because the end felt like such a drag, or I don't even know if it was the end or if there were just so many pieces drawn out throughout the book that made it overall long, and I was just tired by the end of the reading experience. Yeah, so I gave it 3 stars. Not my favorite, but I did like it. I would read Stephen King again, I think, if he had a similar sort of fantasy plot, but I'm not gonna do the horror stuff. I'm not there yet. We have one more book to talk about that I read in the month of March. We are at 506, and the last book that I read, I got this book at my only trip to a bookstore in the month of March. I went to one bookstore in the month of March. It was a Barnes & Noble, and I got The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. This is a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, or like signature edition, and I just thought it was really pretty. It's foiled really nicely. Also, we have to talk about the actual book itself. When you take the dust jacket off, which is foiled, this is what the actual hardcover looks like, and that is so pretty. We have just like these candles. It's very like seance vibe. Okay, there's like a faint writing of a letter underneath, and then look at these end pages. This is so pretty. This is like the incantation they read to start a seance. I just thought this edition was gorgeous, and I still get a teacher discount at Barnes & Noble. This book I also read in not exactly 24 hours, like 36. I'll give it 36. But this was my last crush to read after finishing Fairy Tale. I was like, I can squeeze one more book in, and Sarah Penner also wrote The Lost Apothecary, and I know her books move really quickly and are really engrossing and really fast-paced, so I knew I could fly through this book if I really wanted to. This follows Lena, who, I think it's Lena, her sister was murdered on Halloween the previous year. Lena is in Paris in 1837 with this woman named Vaudeline Delaire, who is a world-renowned psychic medium that uses seances to help people solve cold case murders. She meets with families of the deceased in the places where they were murdered. She conducts a seance to find different clues or to reveal who the murderer was. So Lena has gone to study under Vaudeline to learn how to conduct a seance, because Vaudeline has vowed never to return to London. So she knows that if she wants to have a seance and connect with her sister and discover her sister's killer, she is going to have to do the seance herself. While she is studying under Vaudeline, Vaudeline gets a request from the London Seance Society to do a seance, return to London, and conduct a seance to investigate the murder that's gone unsolved of their president, Mr. Volkman. We learned throughout their time there that the London Seance Society is kind of a sham. They're doing like tricksters, fraudulent things to basically make money and to marry off their members to all of these widows who've lost their husbands. Shady things. Lena also learns that her sister was studying under Vaudeline and was also kind of entangled with the London Seance Society, which is strictly a gentleman's club and women are not allowed to fraternize. But Evie has been attending lectures and has been engaged with a vice president, Mr. Morley, and learning all of these things. We unravel this dual mystery, and when they arrive in London, Vaudeline and Lena realize that maybe the murders of Mr. Volkman and Evie are intertwined, so they conduct seances together to try and figure out what happened in these murders and bring the truth to light. This book, like I said, was super fast paced. In The Lost Apothecary, we had a dual timeline from a present timeline and a past timeline. In this one, we have a dual timeline as well, but it's more of a dual perspective. We follow Mr. Morley, who's got like these shady secrets, knows what's going on, and we have Lena's timeline, who is trying to actively figure out what's going on, but Mr. Morley already knows the truth. We're slowly getting things from Mr. Morley while we're also slowly figuring out things with Lena. So we're slowly but surely colliding and figuring out the truth of the story with both of these perspectives. You can't do one without the other, which I think is a really interesting twist of this book. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I think they are fast. I think they are quick reads. They are engrossing. I think they're really interesting topics. But for some reason, this book, I wasn't really like super invested. I was like, I know you're gonna tell me, but I'm not like enticed along the way to figure out what happens. I'm just kind of reading to get to the end, which is not my favorite experience of a book, and it's always kind of a bummer, especially because I was so excited for this one. It was on the top of my list. It was interesting because this was a little bit more of a fantastical element that wasn't in The Lost Apothecary, and I found myself having doubts in the magic of the seance and the medium and the spirits and things. There is a portion where Lena absorbs the spirit of Evie and is entranced conducting the seance. Evie is speaking through her, and I really couldn't suspend my disbelief for that. The biggest reason I gave this book 3.5 stars, I did not love either of our main characters, actually really any of our characters. I found none of them to be trustworthy. Mr. Morley was a horrible human. He was just a gross, yucky man, and I did not like him. Vaudeline was like very, very secretive. I couldn't really trust her, couldn't really figure her out, and Lena was just kind of annoying. Throughout the whole book, she has a problem of being very quick to assume and to see the worst in people and to doubt people and assume that they are being ill-intentioned or that they are out to get her. And every single time she is wrong, but she never learns. Like, she never figures out and course corrects. It's like, wait, I've done this before where I've assumed the worst on somebody and they actually didn't do anything wrong and I damaged my relationships. But nope. I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna assume I'm right. I'm gonna know the situation. I found it very frustrating that again and again she had the same issue. That was the main reason she wanted to solve her sister's murder, was because she had gotten in a fight with Evie before the day she died because of the same thing. She assumed Evie was being like malicious and she wasn't, and they had a big fight, and that was the last thing she ever said to her sister. You would think after something like that you would maybe reevaluate, but she did not, which I just found bothersome. Like I said before, if I'm not finding a character I can connect with, that I appreciate, that I respect, that I love, I'm gonna really struggle to enjoy the book. It's just a key aspect for me. All in all, this month we had 2 4-star reads, we had 1 5-star read, we had a 3-star read, and a 3.5-star read. We also read a grand total of 2,326 pages, which is awesome. I read 6 books, which is way more than I thought. And overall, I'm really happy with the reading that I did this month. I feel like I diversified my palette a lot. I did YA fantasy, I did realistic YA, I did thriller, I did adult fiction, I did adult fantasy, I did Disney again. It was just a very diverse mix of reads, which I'm trying to be better about this year. So I'm really excited. That's all that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know, have you read any of these books down in the comments? What was the best thing that you read in the month of March? Was there anything that really flopped for you? Let me know. Also, how are you doing on your reading goal if you set one? Are you making progress? Are we a little behind? How are we doing? How are we feeling? Leave that all in the comments down below for me, and leave me a little thought cloud emoji, and I will see you guys in my next one. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, and happy reading, friends.